Welcome to Interesting Choices, the podcast about media that makes interesting choices. I'm one of your hosts, Kate.
And I'm Sky, and this week we're talking about 1984's Ice Pirates.
So when you suggested this movie, I was like, oh yeah, Ice Pirates. I have some hazy memory of it from when I was a wee child watching it on like TNT or TBS or something.
I don't remember exactly how I heard about it the first time. I know it was back when Netflix was in its nascent days, so they were just grabbing everything they could get a hold of.
This is definitely one of those movies that I didn't really remember literally anything about. And so I was in for quite a surprise when it was the movie that we ended up watching. It is from 1984.
Yeah, and it's got a heck of a supporting cast, I gotta say.
I was very surprised at all of the super famous actors and actresses in this movie. These people are punching way, way above the weight class for this film. Like, you have Anjelica Huston, you have Robert Ulrich, you have Bruce Vilanch.
Yeah.
Basically people that I have no idea how they managed to get roped into doing this film. It's a movie filled with interesting choices.
It's definitely a fun watch at the very least. And just the babiest face of baby-faced Ron Perlman.
Yeah. I just think about this film and I can't wrap my mind around it. There is so much production value in this movie.
Yeah, that really hit me on this viewing too, just how much more expensive it looked than it probably actually was.
Well, it cost $9 million in 84.
Oh, wow.
So that's a pretty sizable budget, and you can see where they spent it. Like, there are a lot of relatively elaborate sets, very elaborate costumes, vehicles of all sorts.
Oh, yeah.
They spent a lot of money, and I'm sure all of the actors themselves, I don't know if they're paid well, but they were paid to show up.
Yeah, and models, too. There were a lot of establishing shots of futuristic cities that were set up in models form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you contrast this to something like Island City, right? Which, I mean, it's apples to oranges, to be sure. One was a TV pilot made on the cheap in order to try to stretch into a show. When was Island City made? Like in 92?
93, 90, early 90s.
So almost a decade later. And the costumes and the effects, the models in this film looked a lot more solid. They looked a lot better.
Yeah, especially the costumes. I mean, they're just in a league of their own. The first couple times I saw it, they just kind of blended in with everything else, and this time it really kind of stuck out to me how much they were going for space pirates as literal pirates. Like, everyone's got the booty boots, the poofy shirts, leather vests, sabers and swords. Anjelica Huston goes through, like, I think 3 different costume changes of varying warrior woman.
Yeah, hers are sort of haute couture, like Terry Mugler type cages of metal and these very avant-garde styles that seem deeply impractical to fight in, but looked really good. And our main dude, Jason, he was basically wearing one of those like Daisy Duke style shirts that ties in the front, like at his midriff. Like it would not be out of place on like Lady Cowhand going to hoedown or something.
Yeah, that one. And then I think he had a leather vest the other half of the time.
Mm-hmm. It's such a bizarre film.
Only one peg leg, though.
Yeah, but there are a lot of pirate-esque amputations.
Oh, yeah.
So, but just a word of warning, if you haven't seen this film, there are some, let's say, pretty objectionable scenes by today's standards. So, heads up, there's some overt racism. There's some kind of gross, casual mention of sexual assault. and things like that. And it's very much a product of its time.
It really is. And part of me wants to almost forget it because he says it in a joking manner, but it's still pretty like, whoa, dude, come on.
Yeah. So I guess this movie has a lot of backstory to it, because the premise for them being the titular ice pirates is that the universe is honked.
Yeah, there was humanity spread out into the stars and met other alien races, and there was a whole bunch of intergalactic wars, and then all of the water went away, except for one planet.
So water becomes the most valuable currency in the universe. Everyone is fighting over water and smuggling water, and there are monopolies of water that control vast amounts of power. And so our heroic crew is a band of ice pirates who are going around raiding ships for their ice.
Yeah, specifically the Templars, which they just say, and they're in charge. They really don't go into any kind of depth as to what they believe or do, other than having all the money and being in charge. So
they also dress like Templars.
It's an interesting mix. They've got a lot of things from medieval knight, like the chainmail hoods and shoulders, and then they've got, stuff that's informed by Japanese style, like the breastplates were kind of samurai-ish, and they all have katanas with just these ridiculous spiky handguards that just look like they'd get stuck on everything.
Yeah, there are very few, if any, projectile weapons in this. Mostly everything is fought hand to hand with different varieties of swords. Pretty much everybody's got at least one sword on them at all times.
Swords and axes, and one of the robots had like a bladed metal tonfa thingies.
Kind of a Baraka from Mortal Kombat type thing going on, like arm blades.
Yeah.
So you mentioned robots. There are a lot of robots in this movie.
Real and people in costume.
Yeah. Pretty much the opening shot of the film is a bunch of robots, which are people in these big rubbery suits that move really like rubbery. People in very rubbery suits. But they do encounter sort of real, quote unquote, droid looking robots.
There's a few, I'm guessing, remote control. They're really plasticky and bulbous, and they got lights everywhere, and they're kind of cute, I guess, in their own way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're very 80s robots. There is no point at which I ever thought those robots were a threat to anyone.
Yeah, especially the one in the very beginning when they're pulling off their heist. They cut their way into a Templar ship. It's a bathroom. The very first joke of the movie is potty humor, but it kind of sets the tone. And they're sneaking their way down a hallway, and they see a little, couldn't be more than like 2.5 feet tall, basically a globe on top of a wedge gliding around. And they climb up into the rafters to escape, its watchful eye, and then it goes away, and it turns out it went to get people. Because they're just hanging onto the ceiling.
Let's see. When did Star Wars come out? 78? 77?
77.
77. So you have a good 7 years of technology, and it somehow looks way worse than R2.
Yeah.
It's but it's very cute. It has like big old eyes and it kind of almost a very friendly face to it.
Little stubby grabbers. It looked like you probably could pick it up at Radio Shack around that same time.
Yeah, if you put this in a movie with a bunch of children and they were like, oh, we found this robot wandering around and it's our best friend now, I would not be surprised.
But yeah, so we start off with a heist. And things seem to be going according to plan. They get into a lot of hand-to-hand.
They are raiding this ship and supposedly to take the ice from it. But the ice is in this giant warehouse looking hangar bay that is straight up just a big warehouse with all the stuff you would see in a regular Earth human warehouse, including just a folding aluminum ladder that is just set up to go to the control station. But before that, when they're running from this robot and the patrol that it summons, they duck into a room where there's an old maid, literally a maid, who is old.
A literal old maid, yeah.
And she's there. She's very upset that these ruffians are coming in to rough in her space. And she's there serving the princess.
Yeah, they initially duck in just to escape, and then Jason starts poking around, and he finds a woman under glass. And probably one of the nicest fog effects I've ever seen in there.
Yeah, the entire scene, I was thinking how uncomfortable it would be, because she's a lady in a dress, beautifully made up hair, laying down on this table that has a sort of circular, like tubular cover over it, made out of quote unquote glass, probably some sort of acrylic or something.
It definitely wiggled when he opened it.
Yeah, so she's in this transparent tube, but all around her hair were these like tendrils of smoke, these like fog, this in this tube, and it didn't fill the tube. It was just kind of wisping up around her. It looked great, but I can't imagine it would be comfortable to film at all. You'd just be in there hot boxing with like vaporized mineral oil for like 20 minutes. Ooh.
Maybe she was lucky and they used dry ice. I don't know.
That would just straight up kill you, I think.
Oh God, that's right. I forgot. Dry ice is carbon dioxide.
Yeah, I hope they filmed that quickly is all I got to say.
Yeah.
But it was a good effect.
But he looks and everyone's like, come on, we need to get the actual money. Leave the person in the tube alone. And he makes a crack about raping and pillaging.
Yeah. One of the crew is upset that they have not managed to meet their typical quotas of raping and pillaging.
It was Jason.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yes. The rest of the crew is like, come on, we need to go steal the actual money. And Jason's like, what happened to raping and pillaging? And I was like, oh.
It's super gross to hear that from our hero.
It's real bad.
But it's the 80s and things were gross. Yeah, so they duck out and then they go raid that totally legit warehouse.
Yeah, they blow open the space doors and get the space forklift and get some space ice, which is totally not a big sheets of ABS plastic glued together.
Yeah, they start stealing some ice, but then at one point, they're holding all the guards at like gunpoint, I think.
They get to the bridge and they got people at gunpoint, and then, while they're not looking, someone leaps across the room and hits the alarm button.
It's one of the eunuchs.
Yeah, that was probably one of the weirder things about the movie is the eunuchs.
Yeah, so this movie has the idea of slavery. And basically there are all of these eunuchs who apparently were just regular men who were captured and made into eunuchs wearing these silver like unitards.
Yeah.
And these big white poofy wigs. It's such a bizarre choice, but they're on the bridge working the console for these Templars.
There's like 2 Templars and the rest of the crew is eunuchs, and one of them, makes a flying leap and manages to hit the alarm button and all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, that's when all of the enemy robots come in, and all of the fights between the robots and the people, I do not understand why they have robots, because they are so terrible.
There was a point where someone was flailing at him and it wasn't doing anything. So I guess someone started using robots and then other people started having, it was like an escalation thing. It was like they're slow and clumsy and stupid, but they're the only ones that can hurt each other.
You just have these big rubbery robots just wailing on each other with big fake axes and swords. And some are smaller and have punching powers. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense, but our crew kind of absconds with some of the ice, but Jason decides to call an audible and change the plan on his way out.
Yeah. he goes back for the girl. If you're listening to this and wondering why didn't the old maid raise the alarm when they left, it's because they left one of the robots just giving her a hug and putting its hand over her mouth in the room this entire time.
She was basically just kidnapped and captured by a robot. And then he opens up the tube, takes out the princess, and then, as I recall, he bridal carries her like most of the way to the ship.
Yeah, he's got her in both arms, and she's kind of draped, and she's calling out for the maid, whose name is Nanny, weirdly enough.
They end up fighting their way back to the ship, and I think that's where one of the hero robots ends up making a show for himself because he's small and fast and fighting these other ones and ends up being heroic. I don't know. They made a big deal about it, and mostly everything in this movie is comic relief and can be thrown out entirely.
Especially the robots.
Yeah, the robots don't matter at all.
They pretty much took all of the slapstick that could be in this movie, condensed it into all the scenes with the robots. The robots are just slapstick-omatics. The sense that I got was that the Templar robots were like the latest model, and they had, like fancy paint on them, but the robot costumes they're so jumbled together and look like they were just slapped together out of everything that they all kind of end up looking the same. Yeah,
there's no real differentiation between them. Like, They kind of feel like a kaiju from old monster movies, the way that they move and the way they kind of just rubber around. But you don't get the sense that they are military quality in any way, shape, or form. There's just a lot of times when Jason and the crew will just like walk around enemy robots because they're too slow to do anything.
And then one of their robots has like a bad twitch or something, and they have to pull a wire in his neck, and then he's just limping the rest of the time. And
these robots are weirdly semi-sentient.
Yeah.
Like some cower in fear, some make noise and like chatter with one another. And at some point, I think the crew like pulls out a gun on one of the robots who's being cowardly and is like, "No, get in there."
They try to inspire courage in him.
It's so weird.
Yeah. But they make it back to the bridge, and we get a little brief interlude with, I guess, the head Templar guy. He's certainly got the fanciest hat.
He kind of looks like the evil prince from Shrek.
He kind of reminded me of the evil cardinal from Lady Hawk.
He might be the same guy.
I wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, we get a brief little exposition about how they've been trying to ramp up taking out the pirates, putting more ships. The captain of the ship is like, "You didn't give us enough ships." And the other guy's like, "Well, maybe you're just not trying hard enough." And
oh, right. The evil Templar guy was John Carradine.
Oh, yeah.
Father of last week's movie star, or last episode's movie star, David Carradine.
Quote unquote star.
Yeah, so it's Carradine's all the way down, is what I'm saying.
One thing that really bugged me at the movie, like a lot of it I can forgive because it's fun and it's, at least interesting. But the one thing that really bugged me, and it's just kind of a me problem, is like when they're doing space battles, you really don't get a sense of where everyone is and what exactly they're trying to do. It kind of looks like they play space chicken for a second. And then the pirates ship splits into three and they run away, and the Templars give chase to Jason's ship. And then they have a brief moment where the mechanic plays a video game that's, I guess, shooting up boarding parties or something.
It's literally just like low-rent Space Invaders, where I think he's trying to shoot down incoming missiles or something. And then at some point he misses one. He's like, "Well, we're boned." And then the ship explodes. And then the boarding party comes in because, yeah, I guess they are just... I never understood that. Never understood that.
I mean, it was fun. It could have been a little better explained. But in a weird turn of events, they get captured pretty much right away.
Yeah. But only the people on Jason's third of the ship. 2/3 of the crew gets out, or we don't know. But the film follows Jason and his sidekick Roscoe.
I don't remember.
He's the black dude.
Probably the only level-headed person in the whole movie.
Yeah, he's legit the only one that has any sense to him. Jason is definitely one of those people that moves around the world like he's wearing plot armor, because he is.
But there's a scene later he's pretty much banking on the fact that he's got plot armor. But yeah, they get captured, and they kind of go over. This is where the movie explains the eunuchs and how they're lobotomized and castrated, and it kind of implies that all of the eunuchs had been political prisoners before they went through the process.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, just kind of brushed off in the movie. It's really horrifying.
Yeah, it's awful. There's a lot of awful stuff there. Before they end up going through the eunuch process, they are sent to a prison where they're kind of held with a bunch of other prisoners in a big old cage.
Yeah. We got a prison scene. Everyone, the feeding the prisoners kind of stock scene where someone's walking along, handing out slop. Everyone's got their bowls out. It looks like it's just like beef broth or something.
It looked like motor oil.
Yeah.
It was this thick, viscous, sort of like amber-colored fluid.
Everybody hold your bowl out for your Pennzoil.
Mm-hmm. They meet a guy in the prison who's very large, but he's friendly.
Probably one of the cooler characters, at least I felt like.
Yeah, in any other film, normally you encounter a big dude who's eyeing your food in prison. He would be an antagonist. But this guy, he's just like, hey, can I just have some of that food if you're not going to eat it? I'll trade you this gold chain for it.
But then it turns out he stole that from another one of the prisoners.
Yeah.
Which is another kind of neat thing, because usually the huge guy isn't the sticky-fingered, agile thief type of person. He's a big dude, but he's also very amiable and apparently a master thief as well.
I think his name is Killjoy. I think that's...
I'm trying to look it up. My phone is not cooperating.
Anyway, Jason and Roscoe are sent off to become eunuchs, where Killjoy isn't. He's pretending to be a monk or something.
There was a priest in their cell, and as they're all in rectangular kind of cages that they move around with cranes like they were cargo crates, but they set it down to release the priest, and as he's getting out, turns out it was Killjoy. He somehow got a hold of the priest's robes while no one was looking. He's
actually very capable compared to Jason.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jason and Roscoe and a bunch of other men are taken from this prison.
Power to the people guy.
Who's trying to incite some amount of like proletariat rebellion against the ruling class, which...
He's pretty much just there for that comedic effect and to drop a few lines about the Templars having killed the princess's dad.
So the princess is not a willing guest of the Templars. She's more or less a political football, like a lot of princesses end up being. But all of these guys get put into the eunuch factory, where they're strapped down to conveyor belts.
The world's worst assembly line.
It looked like they went to like a proper factory.
Yeah.
And put these guys on a conveyor belt. It
actually strapped them down.
Yeah.
While they were being transported, they just had a brief moment of Jason and the princess, locking eyes.
Yeah, she was there somehow for some reason.
I don't know. Pope John Paul the asshole was there with them. But yeah, they go through the process. A couple of guys are, they've got hedge trimmers that are obviously not touching the people on the assembly line. Then they pull off their clothes, so I guess they were cutting the clothes off for the process. But they're, arguing about how the company's stiffing them on overtime, and if this doesn't, they don't do anything about it, I'm going to take it up with my union rep. And then they go to get shaved, and there's the guy with the shaky hands and the straight razor.
Yeah, it's just one long comedic sequence about, I don't know, factory work.
Yeah.
It's like none of it needed to happen, but this movie was 90 minutes long and they needed to make that runtime, so...
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of builds up the I wouldn't say tension, but it really makes you think that something's going to happen to them.
Yeah, it does show them getting processed, like prepared for something to happen. And then eventually they move down the line. They're shaved. They're mostly unclothed, even though they're still wearing pants, I think.
Yeah.
Which, considering the last machine of the conveyor is literally just a metal arm with two little metal jaws, which are just genital sized metal jaws.
Yeah.
That come down and, between legs and start chomping.
Yeah. There's just on an accordion metal extendo arm, a little bear trap jaw assembly. It just starts making snapping motions. And then, they start screaming because, of course, and then they get past it and, there's the princess.
Yeah, and the princess is like, shh, just pretend like the thing happened to you, but you have to obey me or it will really happen to you.
Yeah, that was the thing that kind of struck me, because she says when Jason goes by, she's just like, just pretend it happened to you, keep quiet. And then when Roscoe goes by, she's like, or else it will really happen to you. It's like she's threatening the black guy out of the two of them.
Yeah, it's pretty gross how they treat black people in this film. It's not pleasant. Presumably they go through the rest of the eunuch prep thing, even though they never get lobotomized or processed in any other real way.
They get shots, but
they get shots. But the next time you see them, they're getting dressed up in their little eunuch outfits.
And they're wearing their dance belts with their future font numbers. All the eunuchs have numbers on them instead of names. But they got their powdered wigs, and Roscoe's got a white mustache now.
Yeah, for some bizarre reason. And they're all doing this really terrible falsetto.
Yeah.
It's so many choices.
And they come out of the production hallway, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of an L switchback kind of wall situation where they walk out from behind another wall in front of another wall, and they're in the eunuch showroom.
Yeah, it's where a bunch of other process units are there on display, and our heroes end up getting in line, and in walks the old maid. She's accompanied by the princess, and they are shopping.
And the eunuch dealer, I guess, is trying to give them the hard sell. And they pretty much immediately grab, Jason and Roscoe.
The princess takes some time to just get in her digs on how terrible Jason is. And there's just a lot of talk about slavery. And I feel so bad for the actor that had to play Roscoe. Just had sitting there having to listen to these white people talk about how he would be a good slave because he matched the wallpaper.
Oh God.
They explicitly say, I'll take the black one because he'll match the wallpaper. They objectify him in such a super gross way that
they specifically I love the black one.
Yeah, it's It is not the colorblind future that you see in a lot of other sci-fi media. This is a future that still has very specific racial prejudices that are explicit throughout the film, and it's not great.
No, but thankfully we don't spend a lot of time at the eunuch dealership.
No, they kind of just take them and end up going off.
They go to a party. She takes them to be help at a party she's throwing or having thrown, I guess. I didn't catch why, but everyone's drinking. There seems to be this kind of drug where you put some sort of headband on and electrocute your brain, and then you go and float up on the ceiling with your friends.
Mm-hmm.
Roscoe sneaking drinks as you would.
Yeah, they end up going into a closet to have a discussion, and they meet a robot there who's actually just Killjoy in a robot suit.
There's a bunch of robots, and then Killjoy just happens to be there, and he's like, hey, if you go back out there, grab me a sandwich. Or cake. Give me cake.
He's super chill about just being like there as a robot, and no real explanation is given of why he's there other than just like he needed to be.
I guess he had to amscray out of the priest thing at some point. I don't know. It was fun, and at this point I kind of hoped he kept showing up like that throughout the rest of the movie, but after now he kind of just joins the crew, which is good too.
Yeah, because there's a bit of a chase.
John Carradine, the jerk pope, he's there. He makes a note of the two eunuchs are actually Jason and Roscoe, so he makes them, but he doesn't know that they haven't been put through the process. I got the sense that the princess wasn't supposed to leave, and then her plan was basically to have them pretend to kidnap her, and then they would make it to the spaceport and grab a ship. And he basically just sees them walking out the front door. Says, "Get them."
Yeah, and then there's a chase.
It's not a bad chase.
They somehow steal a motorcycle.
Everybody jumps on.
Yeah, all four of them jump on this motorcycle, but our big boy Killjoy falls off and is dragged behind through the streets in his robot costume while they're in pursuit,
shedding sparks the entire way.
Yeah, there's a long chase through the city.
There's a few little gags there. They accidentally commit a hit and run on a robot family. They crash the motorcycle and they get split up. Jason and the princess go up a set of stairs. Roscoe and Killjoy hook up with the robot pimp.
Oh yeah, that was also real gross.
Yeah,
there's a robot who had a very, very stereotypical,
very heavily coded
urban black patois, let's say.
A holographic purple casing, I guess. A little TV to see all of his ladies.
He straight out says, do you want titties? They're like, no, we're on the run. But then he says, well, you get a free ride to the place with the titties, I guess, as part of this package. And needing transportation, they decide to go with him.
Oh, ride's good. And they end up actually paying with the gold necklace from earlier. So that comes into play. Mm-hmm. But they all make it back to the ship. And we get a really badly composited shot of John Carradine looking out the window and seeing a terrible little ship shoot up into the night sky.
While they're fleeing, the princess reveals that the reason that she rescued these two pirates is that she wants them to help her find her father.
Well, she wants them to help her find someone that they know whose name is Lanky Nibs. Oh, he has information on her father. But yeah, we pick up the princess and Killjoy, and that starts the trend of just picking up random people to join the crew. And
one of those random things that joins the crew is a weird little egg.
Space herpes. Remembering it before I started watching it, I thought they caught it from, the ride they took earlier. I'm glad they didn't, because that would have been like a bit much.
Yeah, I think they explain it later that there was just some closet with a manifest of items, and one of the things that fell out during their troubles was this geode-looking rock thing.
It's like a golf ball sized egg kind of thing.
It's pretty big because it has to crack open and release all this goo and this really gross looking puppet.
It wasn't too bad. It had kind of like a ring of teeth, it was still gross, but it wasn't like super gross until, a face came out of the ring of teeth. And it's just this horrible little face.
It was really gross.
If you can imagine like a lamprey, but in the center, instead of, the entry to the rest of the creature, it's a face. Like a little horrible little wax doll face.
Yeah, but it hatches from this egg and then starts slithering around the deck of the ship, at which point it clamps onto Roscoe while he's shirtless for some reason.
He's taking a nap and he understandably freaks out.
And then there's just a long sequence when the two of them are just trying to chase it and being like, what is this? What is this? They're just totally flipping out.
When that egg hatched, I was like, oh, and the B plot's hatching.
Except it's more like a G plot. It doesn't actually do anything.
There's an A plot and then there's just this little, I guess it's more like a running gag, even though it's just kind of gross and not really funny.
Mm-hmm.
Other than, the cracks where they're like, oh, the ship has herpes.
And that's it. That's it. It just goes under a table, and they're like, "Well, I'm just gonna try to pretend like that never happened."
It went into the heating duct. Well, anyways.
They decide to head towards the pirate planet, I think,
Space Tortuga.
and reunite with their old crew, who are all just hanging out at this big bar restaurant open area thing.
Yeah, we get like an establishing roll up. Jason and them roll up in like this weird plastic electric car, and we get a lot of shots of people just, wearing peasant clothes and fighting in a futuristic street, and some guy's getting his shoes shined and paying with a cup of water, and it's a real Pirates of the Caribbean type setup, but with a lot of futuristic stuff everywhere.
Yeah, it's basically like if you took Tortuga from Pirates of the Caribbean and you mushed it up with the street from Blade Runner and then made it a lot less stylish than both.
They get to the bar, and we find out that the other two ships didn't too well. They lost the ice they had, and one of them, I think, got blown up by a meteor. But Ron Perlman and Anjelica Huston are there.
We forgot to talk about it, but during the initial escape, Ron Perlman gets his hand chopped off by a robot.
Just cut right off, and someone just hands it back to him, and then next thing we know, he's got two perfectly working human hands.
Yeah, he's not very plussed about having his hand chopped off. He's just like, yep, got my hand chopped off.
And he hands it back and it's like, oh, thank you very much.
Yeah. And then when they see him again, he has two hands, and it's great. And then someone tries to shake his hand, and his hand falls off, and it's the old my rotting fake hand, except it's my real chopped off hand trick. I don't know what this movie is.
The back of the Blu-ray at least tried to sell it as like the first sci-fi comedy. I don't know about that, but it definitely tries to be funny. It doesn't always succeed. It's certainly amusing a lot of the time.
It is. I think there's a part of me that in my youth got this movie mixed up with Time Bandits. And so a lot of the things that I think I remembered about this film, I actually remembered from Time Bandits. And so watching it again was a wild revelation of, oh, this is both like higher production value, but also very cheap looking at the same time.
It doesn't really come up until later, but all throughout the movie, they've just been sort of half mentioning that the princess's father disappeared because he was searching for a mythical seventh planet. They don't really explain what it is until a little later. And then the Power to the People guy explains that he was searching for it, but then the Templars killed him because they were afraid he would find it, and that would end their monopoly of water.
Yeah, because the seventh world is a world covered in water, so rich with water that it rains from the sky. And so, it is kind of the Uber MacGuffin in this film, the thing that like everyone is searching for, but not really because they don't actually think it exists.
They don't make as big a deal out of it as they probably should have for how important it is to the stuff going on. But yeah, a lot of stuff happens at the bar. We get a really brief thing where some bounty hunters notice Jason's there, and Anjelica Huston does them a harm. The princess is like, can you take me to see Lanky Nibs now? And it's like, well, he's about 12 miles out of town. We need a land vehicle to get there, and the only person with a land vehicle in town is that guy. And maybe if you're real nice to him, he'll do us a favor. And then while that's going on, Anjelica Huston straight up lops a dude's head off.
There's just a fight, and like she ends up dispatching some of his minions, I think. But then
it's just the one guy. He does the big flippy dippy sword swinging around. I'm a good sword guy, show off thing, and slices up the table. Oh
yeah, he cuts up the table, and then he slices the like little bit of ornament off of her chest and leaves her with a cut. Right between her breasts. And
then she does the thing where she does, the swipe, and it looks like he just has a small cut on his neck, and then, head come off.
And no one's super interested in that. It's just like, yep, this is what happens in Space Tortuga.
It's a pirate bar. I mean, what are you going to do? But so that happens, the princess comes back. It turns out the guy Jason was talking at was actually a lady, and she thinks he's super cute.
And then Jason goes over and just like starts trying to seduce this. She looks like the caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland.
It was some pretty good makeup, all things considered. In the credits, he's actually listed as Frog Lady. But yeah, then they go out for a day drive the next day into the Death Desert.
Yeah. And then everything becomes Burning Man somehow.
Yeah, they roll up on the remnants of Burning Man, and there's just a couple baby donkeys and a couple baby pigs that show up. And then you see them there, and then later they're on the ship too. So I'm glad they got adopted.
They straight up just adopt them. And you see later why, for filmmaking reasons, they have them. Yeah. But it's so ridiculously gratuitous. It's like you see them and you're like, I guess they just wanted to have cute baby animals on the ship because baby animals are cute.
I don't blame them. Those are some cute piglets.
Yeah, the pigs are super cute. And the donkeys were super cute too, but they kept like the robots almost tripped over them in every single scene.
But yeah, we find Lanky Nibs. He's just trying to shoot space gophers with a space slingshot in his space wheelchair.
They find out that Lanky Nibs actually used to be a much younger guy, but he fell into a time warp and now he's old.
Yeah, apparently one of the dangers of trying to get to the seventh world is that it's surrounded by time warps. And there's a very specific course you have to take or else you'll get time warp straight out of there. I don't know who the actor was, but he's really putting like 110% into this role.
Yeah, he's far better than they deserve, I think. At some point, they get pursued by, I think, more bounty hunters.
Yeah, well, they're talking to him, and then the movie turns into Mad Max for a hot minute with a space land Viking ship with just the hugest foam skull on the front and big monster truck tires and a bunch of dudes with swords on it, and it's shooting fireballs, and Frog Lady gets exploded.
Yeah, it's action. A bunch of robots get run over.
Lanky Nibs gets run over.
Mm-hmm. And he ends up dying after saying some choice words about the seventh world or something.
Well, there's a really, I don't know if I'd call it overly long. It didn't really need to be in the movie, but it was still a fun sequence of they get the runabout going and they have a land water chase scene, a land ship chase scene. Mm-hmm. Where basically Jason tricks everyone to look over into looking over one side of the ship, and then he just kicks them off the side of the land ship. They get some choice information from Lanky Nibs with his dying breath, and I was a little sad to see him go. I kind of liked that character for how brief his time in the movie was.
Yeah, he seemed among the more charming of the characters.
Him and Killjoy. I think they then go to Bruce Valanche's house.
I wasn't super paying attention during this part of the movie. I don't know why they got there, but Bruce Valanche is basically Bruce Valanche. He's got his same glasses, his same beard. He is barely pretending to be a character. They just dressed him up in this like
velvet robes.
Yeah, this big shoulder padded velvet robe, kind of like royalty looking thing, sitting on this giant throne at the top of these stairs surrounded by Amazons.
Yeah, he's got a cadre of Amazon warrior women. I think the gist of it was that Lanky Nibs learned that he knew where her father was. Mm-hmm. So they got to go from one person who might have known something to the next person who might have known something. And they kind of get into a fight almost immediately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we get our second beheading of the movie.
Yeah, they end up beheading Bruce Valanche, but he's actually just ahead. Kind of like those Futurama head in jars. It's just a head, and they knock him off, and they end up capturing him because he's just a head, and they torture him for information by tickling him with a feather.
And then he's like, "Your dad's in the Oval Room." Apparently, he was just in the house with them the whole time. Mm-hmm. They get there, and it's just a really super realistic looking robot.
Yep,
and
that's it.
Yeah, they go back, and then it turns out he's been hiding a ring somewhere in his head that contains the hologram of her dad.
Yeah, she takes it and puts it with her own ring and then spins it around. And then it projects a hologram, and her dad tells her how to get to the seventh world, basically. He gives them the information that they need to look for him because he is on the seventh world, is what they find out. So they say, oh, in order to find her father, we need to go to the seventh world. And he gave us the exact navigation path to get there. And if we don't take it, we'll be totally lost in these time warps.
I think there's a brief point where John Carradine goes to visit the head High Templar guy in the rotating bed, the really, really bad arthritis. Like his fingers are almost horizontal. Yeah,
it was a pretty good set. I know they didn't have CG back then, so I think they just took a garden somewhere, like a greenhouse, and they just put this mechanical bed in it to film the scene. It was actually pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I've seen that scene like 3 times, and I still do not remember exactly what it was about, other than I think maybe it was just like, you can't let her reach there, or something like that.
Basically, he sets the antagonist in motion to go chase them down.
Then we get like one of my favorite sequences in the whole movie, where they would just have like this chummy domestic time on the ship. Everyone's just kind of chilling out. Ron Perlman's making a roast turkey. Everybody's
oh yeah, that turkey. They're having a meal, and then Ron Perlman, everyone's super excited about it because he talks it up. He's like, oh, I had fresh vegetables. I did all this and this, and he puts it down, and they're ready to carve into it, and
it gets a round of applause even.
Yeah, he gets a round of applause. And then, what do you know?
Space herpes.
Space herpes pops out of the turkey like a chest burster, and everyone freaks out and starts chasing around, and they have to come clean about the fact that their ship has herpes.
Jason says, and then everyone's real mad that they didn't tell him, or he didn't tell them. It's just really brief, but it's really fun. And you just get to see everybody chilling out, which is... It's just something I like to see in movies. It doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah, you get to see the camaraderie in the crew because, you know, we've seen them kind of separate up until this point, but like seeing them all together, it feels nice. And then at some point after this, Jason and the princess decide to consummate their feelings for one another in this really weird, like a holographic storm sequence.
Yeah, we're 2 for 2 for weird, not quite holodecks.
Yeah.
I think that was called the Environment Simulator or something. There's a weird announcer that was really way more sensual than it needed to be. Because they have it set to Passion Storm.
Yeah, they basically have sex in the rain and thunder. And it's a thing. They're flying through the path that they need to take to the seventh world, and they see a ship catching up to them. They try to like explain it through some weird time dilation mumbo jumbo.
At first they kind of played up like maybe it's like a new model because, you know, Jason's like, they don't have anything that's that fast. But yeah, they're just in time warp and the Templars are catching up to them because reasons.
But then the Templars catch up to them and then they board.
And we get the last big fight of the movie.
Yeah, basically the last sequence of the movie, period.
Pretty much, yeah.
So the Templars start boarding the ship. The robots are fighting other robots. There's a lot of robots because everybody brought robots.
Yeah, they bought a bunch before they left Space Tortuga. Roscoe made his own.
The tiny little robot from the beginning was his favorite because it was faster than everyone else. But it got beat up and he rebuilt it and painted it black.
Because he wanted it to be perfect.
Yeah. Jason asked him why, and it is because he wanted it to be perfect. Yeah, I really like Roscoe, and I really wish, God, at some point, like someone on Space Tortuga straight up calls him the N-word, and it's
one of the bounty hunters.
Up. Yeah.
I think the guy who says it actually is the one who gets his head cut off.
Yeah. It's such a choice, but yeah, Roscoe's the best. And his little robot goes out and fights the other new model robots. There's a lot of just like straight up fighting, and it's intercut with these sped up sequences where You
Yeah.
can see that time is elapsing very quickly.
It's supposed to communicate that. For me, it was really kind of distracting because I don't know, the frame rate changes between the sped up sequences and the actual movie. But yeah, we get a lot of sight gags as people age in real time.
Yeah, for the men, you can see their facial hair growing a little bit, and then at some point the princess falls over, and she feels like a pain in her stomach, and she doesn't really know why. And then they take her off. I think at some point Bruce Vilanch announces that she's pregnant, and that Jason should go visit his pregnant lady.
She wants to see you,
and so he time warps again, and then he's got a nice big bushy beard at this point.
Big old pirate beard. And he shows up at her door, and she's there. Her hair is long. She doesn't have a belly. She's just holding a baby. And he is not excited at all. He's just like, sorry. This is, he seems really surprised about it, honestly.
He seems surprised, but in a way that's like, I don't really want any part of this. And crap. I got to go fight some Templars. I'm sorry.
You get some hallway fighting. The animals, of course, are there so we can see that they have grown up from adorable baby animals to somewhat less adorable adult animals. Still adorable.
Yeah, because the time warp is going stronger and stronger. Because like at first it was only like a couple months at a time, but now we're getting to the point where like years are passing in minutes.
Every minute is a day.
Mm-hmm.
They managed to steer the fighting to the ice vaults, and they have a good sequence where they trip all the robots with a chain.
Yeah.
They come in a single file horizontal line, and then Roscoe's robot drops some barrels on the rest of them.
But by then they're starting to get very old. Like they have gray hair. Roscoe's afro has grown ginormous. It's just this big gray mop of hair, and they're all fighting. He cuts back to the princess, and Nanny's dead in a skeleton.
It was almost kind of upsetting because their son barges into a room and he's like, I'm a pirate now, and he's like 3 or 4 years old, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's like, don't bother Nanny, and she comes and she turns and it's just a skeleton wearing her clothes.
Yeah.
And then, she kind of gets really upset, like you would.
Yeah, it's super messed up. And then again, time cuts back to the hangar where they're fighting in the ice, and now Roscoe and Jason are replaced by old actors. Like just straight up senior citizens in their costumes, just being like, trying to fight, but just being too old for it.
Ron Perlman has I'm getting too old for this moment, and then promptly dies of old age.
Yeah. There's a lot of folks that just like keel over from old age. Then the evil guy, the evil Templar, corners them, and his robots are about to come in and kill our heroes. But then they are saved at the last minute by a dashing young Robert Ulrich.
Jason's son, all grown up, just in time to save the day, comes swinging out of nowhere.
He is triumphant, and he stands there and he's like, aren't you proud, Mom and Dad? And they are so ancient. Like the princess's hair is down to the floor, white. They're both just like about to die.
Yeah, and it really is. He comes swinging in, he hits 2 people with a sword, and then they're all defeated.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get our it was all a dream moment, where it wasn't a dream. It's just they returned. They hit a specific time warp that resets them to the point where they were before they entered the time warp.
Mm-hmm. And they're all back on the bridge right before the Templars caught up to them, and they're young again. And Robert Ulrich kind of like looks over at the princess because he knows she's pregnant now. And they say some sort of offhand thing about how the Templars ship veered off course by 1 degree and got trapped in a time warp, and so we'll never see them again.
Yeah.
And then pretty much the movie's done. Like they're just like, hey, we're at the 7th world.
Yeah, they get to the seventh world and plot twist, it's the Earth.
Yeah, that's it. And then they're like, oh, we're out of a job because there's too much water. Wah, wah.
Yeah. They have a laugh. Roll credits.
Yeah, that's it. Like, the only other time the space herpes comes back is I think one of the robots squishes it with his foot.
Yeah, they don't even see that. They cut to a next scene. The camera's pointed at the robot's foot. Robert Ulrich is just like, good work, Percy.
Yeah.
There's a robot butler named Percy. We didn't mention it.
Yeah. Percy actually has a lot of screen time because he's the one that is with Nanny. And then he ends up like giving the princess a sensual massage and getting run over by the Mad Max truck. Like, he's in the movie a lot, but I just forgot about him because he's not important at all. Like,
honestly, if it weren't for the fact that he had a name and he had like these Chippendale styles, sleeveless cuffs on his wrists and collar with a bow tie, you would not be able to tell him apart from the other robots.
Yeah, Ice Pirates. It is a movie entirely made up of interesting choices. Wow. Apparently it is at 9% on Rotten Tomatoes right now.
I mean, I get that. I don't think it deserves to be that low.
No, I guess the only other movie that kind of has this sort of manic, jokey sci-fi energy is Spaceballs, but that was explicitly a parody.
Yeah, it was also funnier. I mean, not as a dig against Ice Pirates. It tries, but Spaceballs is definitely better written, at least as far as the comedy goes.
It is. A lot of the comedy in this, it falls flat. Definitely doesn't stand the test of time.
Yeah. They
knew it was off color even back then. And today it's not cool. Wow. It's a film. It is a film. Yeah.
I'm not going to go out on a limb and say it's bad. I don't think it's like bad. I think it's definitely, it would be a fun evening with friends to watch and have some drinks, possibly. It's definitely a good group movie.
Sure. Yeah. It's, if you're into cheesy comedy films from the 80s, this is definitely the sort of thing that you would see on a late night matinee type show if you're growing up in that time period. Like USA's Up All Night, if you remember that.
I mean, at the very least, if you want to see what Anjelica Huston would look like if she was drawn by Mobius.
Actually, that is a very good description. Her costumes were dope as hell, honestly, but they seemed super uncomfortable.
They really did, especially that wire scaffolding deal.
Mm-hmm.
There was that one, and there was one where it was like literally a metal corset, like bustier type deal.
Yeah.
And then her final one in the movie was the only one that looked even remotely comfortable.
Apparently, the director also did Mac and Me, which, if you know about how terrible that movie is, it says a lot. He also did the sequel to Mannequin 2 on the Move.
I've never seen that one. I did see Mac and Me. It kind of makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah. He also did Tammy and the T-Rex. Like, this guy's wheelhouse is maybe not the highest quality films.
I would go as far to say Ice Pirates is probably the best thing he's ever made.
He actually did the Philadelphia Experiment.
Okay. Well, never mind then.
Which he did it the same year as Ice Pirates. So who the F knows?
I guess we know where all his attention was focused.
Yeah. But yes, so watch it with your friends. Don't be sober while you watch it. I think that's probably the optimal way.
Get some plastic pirate swords and some, beverage of your choice, probably in some sort of plastic tankard, I guess, to make it a theme night.
Tie off all of your button-down shirts at the midriff and enjoy your ice piratical life.
It won't change your life, but you'll have fun. And sometimes that's all you really need.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. All right. That was certainly a film, Sky.
It sure was.
So where can folks find you on the internet, Sky?
You can find me on Twitter. I practically live there at Shard_Corso, SHARD_CORSO.
And you can find me also on Twitter, Instagram, other places at Army of Meat, MEAT. And I guess we'll be looking forward to a new interesting film for next episode.
Until then, try not to steal your water.
And don't get space herpes.
Wrap up your spaceship.